Thank you, Chris. Good morning, everyone. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to share with you how using connectivity and data at Transurban, we're always constantly trying to improve the way that we operate our road networks. I'm also excited at releasing the results of our final report of the Melbourne road usage study, where we use it as an example of exploring how we extend the technology and the capabilities to solve some of the longer term, as Chris mentioned, funding and demand management issues within our networks. Big data is a term that has been around for many decades, and as all of you know, the rate of data creation is accelerating exponentially. So much so that 90% of data that exists today has been created only in the last 2 years. But for us in the transport and technology space, what is more important, I believe, is how the data is being used to solve some of the important and long-term issues that we face in our sector. At Transurban, we are constantly looking for ways to improve the safety and efficiency of our road networks. We believe at the core of doing that is exploring, trialling, and applying technologies and solutions. And that we try and do in everyday operating and running our assets. Here in Melbourne, we introduced the world-first cashless multi-lane tolling system on CityLink, our motorway. In Virginia, in the United States, we operate dynamic toll pricing on both our 495 and 95 express lanes in order to manage the demand for the express lanes and meet the travel experience expectations of our customers. Using real-time analytics and data that is available from our roadside, we're able to detect incidents on our roads and traffic flow breakdowns in order to allow us to address them and respond to them quickly and safely. But beyond operating our roads and improving how the networks run, we challenge ourselves to think about how to extend these capabilities into thinking about preparing for technology changes that are coming, such as the introduction of connected and autonomous vehicles, but also how do we use these technologies to look for solutions for long-term funding and network management needs. Earlier this week, we released the final report of our Melbourne road usage study. We're very excited at the insights that we have gleaned from the study, and it is what we believe to be the first real-world trial of user-pays road charging in Australia. But before I go into the details of what we found in the studies, let me explain to you why this is such an important topic and why Transurban undertook the initiative in the first place. Australia, like many other jurisdictions around the world, face pressures from growing population, aging population, and increasing urbanisation in our cities. Our primary source of revenue, fuel excise, has been diminishing steadily as a result of the uptake of fuel-efficient vehicles and more recently, electric models. While that is great for the environment, the reduction in funding does pose some serious challenges to how we maintain, enhance, and extend our network as the demand for them grows with our population and our community needs. At the same time, we recognise that congestion is an issue that we are dealing with more and more in our major cities. It doesn't only affect the productivity of our work, but also affects the quality of our lives. And with these as the background and the context, we're interested and passionate about solving the challenges, because like many of you, we work and live in the same major cities around the city, and we understand that having safe and efficient transport network is crucial to the running of these cities and the livability for the communities in them. Conducted over 17 months, 1,635 volunteers across the greater capital city of Melbourne participated in the road usage study, testing a variety of user-pays systems and potential models as alternatives to the current charges and fees that we use to fund roads. The main objective of the study is to understand the attitudes and the behaviours of participants when they experience user pays. We're not here to find the perfect solution or indeed the detailed policy recommendations. What we're interested in is what real people in the real world think and feel about user pays as an alternative funding roads. In the technology world, we also want to use this opportunity to test how technology advances can help us deliver the future of transport that we need. In assembling the components of technology to create a simulated user pays experience, we use a range of components, including in-vehicle GPS devices, to collect the information and to gather the information about vehicle movements and driver behaviours. We created a pricing algorithm that simulates road charging under various different models, and a back-office billing and payment and account management system to provide the users with an end-to-end user pays experience. For the in-vehicle GPS devices, we used two types in the study. For most of the vehicles, especially the typically newer models, we were able to deploy the OBD, or the onboard diagnostic device, which attaches to the telematic port of most of these vehicles. For others, typically older vehicles that do not have access to telematics, we use a plug-in GPS device. While these two devices have served us well in the study, we know that for scalable implementation to be effective, considerations have to be given to how compatibility needs to work with the diverse range of vehicles that exist in the current 18 million fleet in Australia. Social media, smartphone adoption, and other technology advances have no doubt changed the societal attitudes to privacy and personal information protection. Having said that, we want to make sure that the participants are comfortable with the way that we have set up the study, particularly in the way that we have gathered the data, captured and stored it, and used it for the purpose of the study. For the in-vehicle GPS devices, we have set up security and protection around how the data is collected and stored. Similarly, for the attitudinal information and demographic profiles that we collect of our participants, we make sure that those are protected for personal information purposes. As an example of privacy protection, we applied a cordon around the area of each participant's household, so effectively masking the GPS coordinates whenever the device is in the proximity of the participant's household, effectively avoiding the ability to detect the exact address of the participant. Some of these concepts we understand are well known to some of you around this room, and are components that we're very interested to further explore as we tackle these funding and network management issues. In order to get a representative of the greater capital city of Melbourne, we recruited participants from all regions, up to 80 kilometres away from the city centre of Melbourne. Each of the participants from different zones have varying access to public transport, which we hypothesise is a key factor in considering how people could potentially change their road use. Once the participants agree to participate in the study and have the in-vehicle GPS device installed, the devices start transmitting data, up to 16 data points at any run time and every 60 seconds, to provide information on the functions and the performance of the device in order for us to monitor the quality of the data that we have collected, as well as the vehicle movements and the driving behaviours that we would like to observe. As you can see on the maps, which shows the GPS transmissions from all of our participants' devices, we've got pretty good coverage of the metropolitan area of Melbourne. Some of our participants, in fact, went interstate, and some of them across the country, and together generated over 1 billion data points just over the course of the study. Now we've got privacy set up, we've got the ecosystem of user pays established, and participants all signed up and keen to explore what user pays look like for road use. We set out to explore the different types of charging models that we would like to test. Comparing it with the baseline, or what we consider to be the normal driving behaviours without application of charging model, we first introduced the participants to 3 usage-based congestion charging. Each of these usage-based congestion charging reflect the current level of expenditure on roads, suggesting that we can replace our existing combination of fuel excise, registration, licensing, local levies in place of a user pays model, be it based on distance or trip in a case of access, or a flat rate or a fixed amount over a time period, similar to a monthly data plan or mobile plan that participants would be familiar with as they procure products and services from other sectors and other utilities. Once we completed the testing of the usage, we introduced our participants to one of two congestion-based demand management charging options. These demand charging options effectively reflect price signals that we could use to manage demand in congested areas, for example, in this case, a cordon around the Melbourne CBD area, or peak and non-peak rates applied to different hours of driving during the time of the day. In this data-rich and analytically imaginative world that we live in, we have access to lots of different types of methods and approaches to analyze the data to understand what it's actually telling us, both in terms of the behaviours through the vehicle movements and the driving patterns that we observe with the GPS data we collect, but also the attitudes of the people that are experiencing user pays through the attitudinal surveys and the feedback that they provide us over the course of the study. For those of you that are interested in more details on that and would like to hear more about the analytics and the methods that we've undertaken, my colleague Stephen McDonald is providing a technical presentation tomorrow morning on this topic. Now, onto the findings. After hearing what participants have to say as they experience user pays and observing the behaviours that they have as they're trialling out some of these options, we believe that a usage-based charging model could work in Australia. Australians are open to trialling different ways of using and paying for roads. Let me break down the findings into two areas aligned with the policy objectives, starting from the side of sustainability and fairness of our funding model. At an aggregate level, we found that the participants continue to maintain their broadly normal driving behaviours and activities when they were using the user pays charging models. It didn't impede on their activities, it didn't impede on their normal driving behaviours. What is unique about a user pays model is it links the funding to usage. In the chart in front of you as an example, as defined by vehicle kilometre mile travelled, or in some of the other charging options, number of trips taken. And what that allows us is to have a funding model that grows with demand, which we know is going to increase as population grows, as urbanised areas intensify. On top of, beyond observing the behaviours, we also tested the participants' attitudes to how they feel about user pays. At the start of the study, we asked the participants about how they feel about the current model, and 85% of participants told us that they were broadly comfortable with how roads are currently funded. Not that many people know the details of the rate of fuel excise or how much they pay exactly for registration, but they were broadly comfortable. Probably not surprising because the system has been around for almost a century. However, experiencing user pays firsthand and thinking about some of these issues over a longer period of time, participants showed a change in their preference. In fact, 60% of the responses told us that they now prefer a user pays model over the current system. We flick our attention over to congestion charging and demand management. Once again, the two charging options that we tested confirmed that at an aggregate level, participants maintain normal driving behaviours and activities throughout the charging option period. However, when we look at the cordon charging option more closely, what we found are participants that normally enter the cordon or move around the cordon as part of their usual driving demonstrated a 10 to 15% reduction in their usage, in weekly cordon usage, while the charging option was applied. Now, individual experiences vary a lot, and some of our participants actually went to great lengths to try and adjust their behaviour in response to the pricing signal. But as a lot of you would know, managing traffic and managing congestion doesn't always involve shifting a large proportion of the population off the road during peak time. In fact, in most of the time, only a small percentage shift in user behaviour during highly congested areas is enough to change the profile of demand across the road network and create a different driving experience for those driving during peak and non-peak hours. Having clarity around the objective of the policy is obviously important in making sure that the design of the funding model is effective. The extent to which congestion is prioritised alongside funding, sustainability and equity will be something that policymakers will continue to explore. For us around the room, the mind can shift to how do we actually prepare for that in terms of the technology, the operations and the data that we need to have in place to facilitate that change. But before I go there, let's hear what some of our participants have to say about their experience on the road usage study.
With this program that I'm doing, I've got a device attached to the vehicle and it doesn't seem to worry me. It's very, small, plugs into the cigarette lighter and it just does what it does.
I didn't get in the car and think, all right, we've got the little black box, it's recording and all that, so I just did what I needed to do, but it sort of did make you think a little bit about how you use the vehicle.
I have no regrets. It's been an interesting study and it's been interesting to see how by changing your driving habits you can reduce the number of kilometres you do in a month or the number of trips you do. So therefore probably long term I'd probably save myself a little bit of money in fuel.
It would be nice to give the people who've got long commutes by car and don't have any other option to get a fair run at the road. Whereas the rest of us can clog it up unnecessarily, and I think if we can, if nothing else comes out of this survey, then that dynamic changes. That'd be terrific.
And thinking about the alternative road funding options that present themselves in front of us in helping us with long-term transport challenges and opportunities, our participants told us there are key elements to any system design and implementation that we need to consider carefully. In transparency and awareness, we are probably not surprised that communities have limited knowledge and awareness of how roads are currently funded. But what the study shows is with the exposure to the right information and the time to experience different models, participants are open to exploring different ways of using and paying for roads. We know that awareness is the first step to leading to openness to change. In terms of choice, 30% of our participants told us that they had changed their behaviours while experiencing usage-based road charging models. Some of those changes come from experimenting and using public transport. Some of our other participants cycled more and others walked more. But they told us that the need for alternative and having access and availability to alternative transport mode is critical to thinking about long-term behaviour shift. And same goes for flexibility in the workplace and availability of services. So when they get to the other end of their journey, they can access what the destination offers. In terms of fairness, we recognise the inherent inequity issues in our current system in that funding is not always linked to demand or the impact, for example, wear and tear on the road, but rather be driven by factors such as the fuel efficiency of your vehicle. The participants agree with that. In choosing and preferring a user pays model, they support a principle that those who benefit should pay. They also told us that it is important to make sure there are adequate protection for vulnerable groups in the community in any new system design. In terms of technology, our participants told us that they were broadly comfortable with the technology that were trialled in the study. 84% of the participants were comfortable with leaving the devices in their vehicles during the study. In fact, many of them forgot that the devices were actually in their vehicles after the initial setup. In terms of privacy and information security, it is something that everyone in this room is aware of and definitely a user of, and our participants reinforce the need to keep those factors top of mind as we design a new system. We're very encouraged by the insights that we've gathered from the study because we believe it sets the dialogue for a longer discussion around what a future transport funding system could look like and how it could meet the demands, the growing demands of our communities. We're excited to know how connectivity and data and growing capabilities can help us solve some of the longer-term policy and reform settings that we have facing our transport sector, not just in Australia, but around the world. With the arrival of further technology advancements in connectivity between vehicle and infrastructure, automation, we believe that we have now got the opportunity to lay the foundations for the design of a future system that will support our growing needs. More importantly, our community has also told us that they're open to having a dialogue about what the future needs to look like and trying new ideas in finding what solutions will meet our needs. There are lots of social, political, and technology challenges that we still have to address, but nothing, I believe, that we can't solve by working together. Thank you.